Very good morning to all students. We'll be continuing with anti-anginal drugs part 2 in Google Classroom as there is some technical issue with my current Zoom application. So today we shall be looking at the role of beta blockers in angina, role of calcium channel blockers in angina, the pharmacology of nicorandil in detail. We shall also be looking at the having a brief overview of the newer anti-anginal drugs, and finally we shall have a look at the drug therapy for myocardial infarction. So beta blockers and calcium channel blockers, their pharmacology you have studied in detail in your previous classes. So today we shall be only looking at the role of beta blockers and calcium channel blockers in angina. So in case of angina, both cardioselective beta blockers as well as non-selective beta blockers can be used. However, cardioselective beta blockers like metoprolol, atenolol and timolol are preferred. They have preferential action or selective action on the beta-1 receptors present on the heart. Now, how do they act in the angina? They block beta-1 receptors of the heart and thus decrease the heart rate, contractility, and cardiac output. So, there is a decreased cardiac work, and this decreases the oxygen consumption by the heart. Now, the decrease in the cardiac work and oxygen consumption is marginal at rest, but there is a great increase in the decrease in the cardiac work and oxygen consumption during exertional states. Hence, they are very useful for exertional angina or the classical angina. Another unwanted effect of beta blockers in angina is that by decreasing the cardiac output and heart rate, they can increase the left ventricular end diastolic volume. The left ventricular end diastolic volume. Hence, this is not to be used in patients who may be having a concurrent cardiac failure. This thing you have to keep in mind. Now, the adverse drug reactions already you have studied. They are bradycardia, can lead to heart block, bronchospasm, fatigue, and insomnia. The use of beta blockers is for prophylaxis in stable angina, where they are given orally and they reduce the frequency and the severity of attacks of stable angina. They are also used for secondary prevention of MI. That is, in patients who had MI, it is used for further or future attacks of MI. They have to be contraindicated in variant angina. This is very important. You have to remember this. Beta blockers are contraindicated in variant angina. This is because they can worsen the vasospasm of coronary artery by the blockade of beta-1 receptors. Whenever there is a blockade of beta-1 receptors, this will cause unopposed alpha-1 mediated vasoconstriction of the coronary arteries, and hence this can be detrimental in variant angina. You already know variant angina, the cause is vasospasm of coronary artery, and this can be worsened by giving beta blockers. It is also contraindicated in patients who are having concurrent asthma or other bronchospastic disorders like COPD, in peripheral vascular disease, and in patients who are having concurrent bradycardia. Always remember that you should never stop beta blockers abruptly. This can precipitate rebound angina or even MI. So their stoppage, if necessary, should be very gradually done. Now we shall have a look at the role of calcium channel blockers in angina. So already in previous class you have studied the detailed pharmacology of calcium channel blockers. So verapamil, diltiazem, DHPs, all of them can be used in angina. Let us see how the mechanism of calcium channel blockers is in angina. So generally you have read in the previous class that they block the calcium influx via L-type calcium channels in cardiac and vascular smooth muscles and decrease the excitation contraction coupling in the heart and the vascular smooth muscle. This will lead to the decrease in the heart rate, decrease in the contractility of the heart. It can cause coronary and peripheral vasodilatation. So the calcium channel blockers have a direct effect on the heart by decreasing the heart rate and the contractility, and they can also have effect on the vascular smooth muscle. That is, they cause coronary as well as peripheral vasodilatation. Now you can see that decreased heart rate and decreased contractility on the heart will decrease the cardiac work and hence the oxygen consumption. Now here the decrease in the oxygen consumption is because of the direct effect on the heart. Now because of the increase in the coronary vasodilatation, it will increase the coronary blood flow. Peripheral vasodilatation will cause a decrease in the afterload and hence decrease in the cardiac work and oxygen consumption. So calcium channel blockers can decrease the cardiac work either by direct action on the heart or by indirectly by acting on the blood vessels. Now if you compare the three different categories of calcium channel blockers, you would have already studied earlier. Verapamil, it is having a direct effect on the heart and decreases the oxygen demand of the heart by decreasing heart rate, contractility, and hence the cardiac work by the heart. The DHPs, on the other hand, they are potent arteriolar dilators. They cause increased coronary flow as well as they decrease the afterload by increasing the arterial dilatation. Okay, and only at high doses they have got a direct effect on the heart. So their effect is mainly because of the arteriolar dilatation. Diltiazem is somewhere middle in between of both verapamil and DHPs. It has got direct action also and it has got action on the blood vessels also. Okay, now so with that we see the uses. So in stable angina it is used just for prophylaxis, and verapamil, diltiazems, DHPs are used, and as I already told you, the benefit is because of the decreased oxygen demand which can occur because of the decreased heart rate, decreased contractility, decreased afterload and dilatation of the coronary blood flow. In different, we have already seen the different calcium channel blockers and seen their respective effects. Now, the only thing that you have to be remembering here is that short-acting DHPs, I think you have already studied in the class on calcium channel blockers, that short-acting DHPs like nifedipine, they can cause reflex tachycardia, which is not there in slow and long-acting DHPs like amlodipine, nicardipine, and so on. So the short-acting DHPs like nifedipine produce reflex tachycardia, and this can aggravate ischemia, and hence we do not prefer them. The slow onset and long acting DHPs like amlodipine and so on are preferred in angina. If you are using a nifedipine, you have to use a sustained release tablet in stable angina. Okay, now for variant angina, also they are used, and here you are using only the calcium channel blockers which are having an action on the vasodilatation, that is diltiazem and DHPs, because here we have to counteract the vasospasm of the coronary vessels. In unstable angina, DHPs are used along with nitrates and beta blockers. We prefer not to use verapamil and diltiazem because they can have a cardiac depressant action, and when they are combined with beta blockers, they can cause addictive cardiac depression, and hence for this reason DHPs are usually used along with nitrates and beta blockers in unstable angina. Now that finishes the role of beta blockers and calcium channel blockers in angina. Now we'll see the new drug, that is nicorandil, and this drug is a second line anti-anginal drug. So far we have discussed nitrates, calcium channel blockers and beta blockers, and they are all first line anti-anginal drug. This is a second line anti-anginal drug. It has got a dual mechanism of action in angina. So you can see the first mechanism of action is that it opens the ATP dependent potassium channel. It is a potassium channel opener. This will cause potassium efflux. This will cause hyperpolarization of the of the vascular smooth muscle, which will cause venodilatation, arterial dilatation. Venodilatation will decrease the preload, arterial dilatation will decrease the afterload, and both these will reduce the cardiac work and oxygen consumption. The other action is that it is just like nitrates. It is also releasing nitric oxide, which will increase the cyclic GMP levels and cause the vascular smooth muscle relaxation. And this can again add on to the beneficial effects. So remember, it has got two mechanisms of action. That is, it opens the potassium channels in the smooth muscles, and the second one, if it is releasing the nitric oxide. Now the actions, it reduces the frequency of angina, it increases the exercise tolerance, okay, and you have to remember one important phenomena that is called as the ischemic preconditioning phenomena. Now what is this ischemic preconditioning phenomena? This is the brief episodes of ischemia and then reperfusion. It can exert a cardioprotective effect on subsequent total vascular occlusion. That means a brief episode of ischemia, then reperfusion. This can cause or this can prevent or this can protect the heart from further occlusion. Okay, this is called as the ischemic preconditioning, and this cardioprotection is achieved by nicorandil through activation of mitochondrial potassium channels. Okay, so always mention this phenomena, ischemic conditioning phenomena, whenever you write a note on nicorandil. Now, it is administered usually orally and metabolized in liver and excreted in urine. It exhibits biphasic elimination. That is, initial T-half is 1 hour, and then the complete the slow phase T-half is 12 hours. The ADRs are mainly because of vasodilatation, just like nitrates, flushing, headache, dizziness, palpitation. Then nausea and vomiting. And the characteristic one adverse effect that is usually seen with nicorandil is large, painful aphthous ulcers. Okay, this is very characteristic of nicorandil use. The use is mainly in resistant angina as a second line drug. It can be given IV for angioplasty during MI. Okay, that is a additional use of nicorandil. Now we'll just have a very quick overview of the other anti-anginal drugs. The first one is dipyridamole. It is a powerful coronary dilator. Okay, so it is dilating the coronary arteries. And how it dilates is that it prevents the uptake and degradation of adenosine. Adenosine is an important mediator of coronary flow, and by preventing the uptake and degradation of adenosine, it is a powerful coronary dilator. However, this drug has caused it is not used because it has resulted in therapeutic failure. Now, why is it so? So this is because whenever there is an ischemia, there is a dilatation of the resistance vessels in the ischemic area. That's as a response to ischemia. Now, what this dipyridamole does is that it dilates the resistance vessels in ischemic area as well as the non-ischemic area. So what happens is that the blood flow is now diverted to the unwanted areas also. That is, in the non-ischemic areas also, the blood flow is diverted. Because of this, the ischemic area receives very less amount of blood that it would have compared to what it would have received if there was no dilatation of the resistance blood vessels in the non-ischemic area. Because of this feature, it has been a therapeutic failure. Had it only dilated the resistance vessels in the ischemic area, it would have been beneficial, but it is dilating the resistance vessels all over, that is even in the non-ischemic area, because of which the amount of blood that is received in the ischemic area is reduced. And this phenomena is called as the coronary steal phenomena. That is a diversion of the blood from the ischemic to the non-ischemic area. This is called as the coronary steal phenomena. Now we'll see the other drugs, that is trimetazidine. Okay, now this is not having an effect on the electrophysiology of the heart. It has got a different mechanism of action. It is inhibiting a mitochondrial enzyme, that is LC3-CAT. Okay, this enzyme is involved in fatty acid oxidation. So always remember that an ischemic myocardium, it uses energy by the oxidation of fatty acid. Okay, it is using energy from the oxidation of fatty acid. Now, and the fatty acid oxidation requires a lot of oxygen. You have already read that in biochemistry classes. Now, during ischemia, this expends a lot of oxygen. Now, what this drug is doing, it is inhibiting the free fatty oxidation by inhibiting the LC3-CAT enzyme involved in the fatty acid oxidation. Now, so what will happen? Now the myocardium will start deriving energy by the glucose oxidation in the myocardium, and this will require only less oxygen consumption as compared to that which was required for fatty acid oxidation. Okay, now the ADR for this drug is mainly gastrointestinal. It causes some gastric burning. It is only used as an add-on drug in angina and post-MI patients. So what we're discussing, the drugs we're discussing now, they are mainly add-on drugs. The next one is ranolazine. It inhibits the inward sodium current in myocardium. It inhibits the inward sodium current in myocardium, and this inward sodium current will decrease the calcium. The inhibition of the sodium current will decrease the calcium entry by sodium calcium exchanger. This will indirectly decrease the intracellular calcium overload in myocardium, decreases the cardiac contractility, and hence the oxygen consumption. The additional action of ranolazine includes the LC3-CAT enzyme inhibition also. Okay, so the two drugs which inhibit the LC3-CAT enzyme are trimetazidine and ranolazine. And ranolazine additionally has got an inhibition of the inward sodium current in myocardium. Okay, it is also a second line drug for angina. Then we have got ivabradine, and ivabradine is actually a purely heart rate reducing anti-anginal drug. It blocks F channels of the SA node and hence reduces the heart rate. And whenever the heart rate reduces, you know there is a decrease in the oxygen consumption also. It is only used for stable angina prophylaxis as an alternative to beta blockers, especially in people in whom the beta blockers are contraindicated. It can also be used for inappropriate sinus tachycardia. So these are the two uses of ivabradine. Now I have just summarized here the actions of the the first line anti-anginal drugs: nitrates, beta blockers, calcium channel blockers. Nitrates, you know, they are mainly decreasing the preload, they increase the coronary flow. Unwanted effect, I told you, it was reflex tachycardia. Beta blockers, they decrease the heart rate, contractility, decrease the cardiac output, cardiac work, and oxygen consumption. They can cause coronary vasospasm and increased end diastolic volume. Calcium channel blockers, mainly DHPs, they are arterial vasodilators, and they also increase the cardiac coronary flow. They can cause reflex tachycardia, especially with the short-acting ones like nifedipine. Okay, now with that basis, we'll go to the combination therapies in angina. So nitrates and beta blockers are usually combined, and this is a very efficacious combination. It also reduces the ADRs. So beta blocker can prevent the reflex tachycardia, which is caused by nitrates. Nitrates can reduce the increased end diastolic volume caused by beta blockers by increasing the venous dilatation. Nitrates can prevent the coronary spasm caused by beta blockers. So they can counteract each other's ADRs and can increase the efficacy of the overall combination. Now, DHPs and beta blockers. The beta blockers prevent the reflex tachycardia of nifedipine. The coronary vasospasm of beta blockers is counteracted by DHPs. So they are counteracting each other's ADRs. Then verapamil diltiazem plus beta blockers is contraindicated because both of them can cause additive depression of the of the heart and can lead to cardiac arrest. So we don't want this combination. Then we have got nitrates and DHPs. So you know they are both act by different mechanisms and they increase the additive efficacy, and they are mainly used in severe variant angina or in cases where beta blockers are contraindicated. Nitrates, beta blockers, and DHPs, they are used mainly for very severe kind of resistant angina, where each one of them contributes its efficacy. Now, the last one that is we are going to see is the drug therapy in myocardial infarction. So, you already know myocardial infarction means it's an ischemic necrosis of a portion of myocardium due to sudden occlusion of a branch of coronary artery by an acute thrombus at the site of atherosclerotic obstruction. About 1/4 of the patients die before therapy can be instituted. The remaining have to be treated in specialized cardiac units with continuous monitoring of the hemodynamic parameters and ECG with proper drugs and dosage. Now we'll see this in different parts. So what happens when a MI patient comes to the casualty? So first, general measures. So you have to decrease the pain, the anxiety and the apprehension of the patient. So usually what is done is 3 doses of GTN sublingually, 5 minutes apart, if there are no contraindications to the use of nitrates. Opioid analgesics like IV morphine 10 mg is given if pain is not relieved by GTN. Promethazine IV has to be given to overcome the opioid-induced vomiting. So opioids chapter you haven't completed and neither have you done the diazepam, but you can just remember this as the management of MI as for the time being. Oxygenation has to be continued with oxygen inhalation and assisted respiration. Then the maintenance of blood volume has to be done by slow IV infusion of saline or low molecular weight dextran. Should see that there is no volume overload. The acidosis has to be corrected by IV infusion of sodium bicarbonate. These are the general measures of management of MI. Now we have to see the clot has been formed. Now that has to be broken. So clot blasters, you can use fibrinolytic agents like streptokinase, urokinase, altiplase. This has to be started within 1 to 2 hours of MI symptom. This is called as a golden period, and if it is not done in this time, there is no point of using these drugs. However, nowadays primary percutaneous coronary intervention, that is angioplasty with stenting, is the preferred mode of therapy for dilating the clot and for dilating the occluded blood vessel. Now, we have to prevent the complications. Now, what are the complications of MI? Arrhythmias, pump failure, and the further thrombus extension. Also, DVT and embolism can occur because of prolonged rest period. Now, how do you prevent arrhythmias? You have to give prophylactic IV infusion of beta blocker metoprolol. This is to prevent the arrhythmias. Now, if arrhythmias have occurred, tachyarrhythmias have to be treated with lidocaine, and bradycardia or heart block has to be treated with atropine. Now, to prevent pump failure, you have to give diuretics like furosemide or vasodilators like GTN or inotropic agents like dopamine or butamine. These two you will understand better when you study the chapters on arrhythmias and cardiac failure. Next one is prevention of thrombus extension. That is, for that you have to give antiplatelet drugs like aspirin or clopidogrel, which we have discussed in the class on antiplatelet drugs. To prevent DVT and embolism, anticoagulants, that is heparin or low molecular weight heparin followed by oral anticoagulants have to be given. Now, the role of heparin and oral anticoagulants for extending prevention of the thrombus extension in the coronary arteries is not that satisfactory. I think I already told you in the class on antiplatelet drugs that the antiplatelets are the ones which prevent thrombus extension in the arteries, whereas the anticoagulants are more useful for venous thrombi. Now, to prevent the future attacks, now the patient has to be continuously put on ACE inhibitors or ARBs to prevent the remodeling and subsequent CHF. To prevent future attacks, the antiplatelets have to be continued throughout life. Beta blockers have to be given to prevent reinfection, CHF and mortality. And this has to be decided if there are no other contraindications to the use of beta blockers. Statins have to be given for control of hyperlipidemia as well as to prevent the pleiotropic, as well as because of their pleiotropic effects, which I think I have discussed in the statin class. So these are the drugs which are used for continuous use, that is antiplatelets, oral beta blockers, and statins. So the important questions: classify anti-anginal drugs. Nitrates have to be prepared as a short note. The role or the rationale for the use of beta blockers, calcium channel blockers in angina can be asked. The rationale for different combination therapies can be asked, and drug therapy for MI can be asked. So you can prepare the notes, and I'll give you some time to mark your attendance in the Google Classroom. Please mark your attendance, and based on that, I'll be reporting to the in charge regarding your attendance.